Now, as I say all the time, when I quote Carter G. Woodson, when you control a man's thinking, you don't have to worry about his actions. And the reason why we think a certain way and we avoid reality because we're actually being controlled by others. Now, this is something that's hard for most people to understand. I can give you a good example. YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, all of them have been before Congress, more or less, or in the court system overseas. Several cases have been won against YouTube and Facebook and others overseas because of the algorithm they use. And that's based on confirmation bias. It's just like I got a lot of friends that watch Fox, a lot that watch CNN, but they never watch anything else. So, of course, the information you get builds upon the information you've already been sold. So you have a tendency to believe and follow what you've been conditioned in your mind to accept. You're being educated to think a certain way. And the things that you see on those channels confirm what they've already told you to think. So, of course, the algorithm that you use on YouTube, if you really look at it and think about it, it always puts up things that confirm the bias that you already have. It doesn't send you anywhere where it knows that you don't like that particular guy or you don't like that particular way of thinking. Your thinking is being manipulated, and you just accept that because you don't know any better. And the way to avoid that is change the channel. In other words, instead of watching Fox, watch Al Jazeera. Instead of watching CNN, hey, watch the BBC. Those just are two examples, and I don't work for any of those companies, but I'm just saying, it's kind of like when you look at ABC or CBS and they come on and they tell you world news tonight. Well, it's not really world news, is it? It's the news concerning the United States. And a limited amount of that. And all I'm telling you is to avoid being manipulated by the media mind control machine. You must look outside your normal channels of information. Now, as I said, I suggested it many times before to people, but people who watch Fox, they won't tune in to Al Jazeera because the people are not saying what they want to hear. Okay, because they have a confirmation bias, and the information that they're getting, they ignore that. It's the same way with people who watch CNN. It's no different. It's the same means of control. And once they control your mind, they don't have to worry about your actions, because your education will make it necessary for you to move in a certain way. Now, optimism bias, belief that bad things happen to others and not to you. So that means you can watch things on television or on YouTube. You can watch people being killed, people being beat, and you become immune to what's going on. You don't feel shame or pain at what happens to others because you're optimistic. You're saying that would never happen to me. Which is really unrealistic, don't you think? Because, it's that type of mindset that makes people believe that, that guy ain't gonna come up in our daughter's or son's school and kill everybody up in there. So, but that's a whole nother issue that needs to be dealt with. I'm just using that as an example of how you believe that bad things happen to others and not to you, because you have an optimistic bias toward that particular situation. Superiority bias, you believe that you're above average intelligence, that you smarter than everybody else. So therefore you bias to any information that's coming based on your confirmation bias, because all these things work together, because they're telling you information that challenges your perceptions. You believe that you have an above average intelligence, so you can't be manipulated. But that fact really is statistically impossible. Most people have average intelligence, and they have to learn, and then you have a religious bias, belief that everything happened for a reason or the will of your particular God. So your religious bias also comes into play in all these other things that helps you to avoid reality, because I don't have to tell you about religious bias. That should be really obvious to you, but I'll break it down just by quick. Some people are biased against people because they're Muslim, or because they're Buddhist, or because they're atheists, and they're biased towards them unrealistically because they hadn't really done anything to you. You're just upset because they don't believe what you believe, and even within your religious system, you have biases among yourselves. Protestants don't like Catholics, or Baptists don't like Lutherans, or Muslims don't act like other Muslims, because one is Shia and one is Sunni. So it's all kind of divisions that come into play, which allows you as an individual to be manipulated. And I say you as an individual because, it takes one person at a time to be miseducated. And it's miseducation that's happening to you. And I really want people to see how the media is manipulating your thinking, because that's the only way to get out of the situation that we're in, to where I go back to the numbers. As I end this video, I'm going back to the numbers. And the numbers say that as Americans, people are stealing our money. We're being ripped off. And even though we don't have health care, we pay for health care in Israel. They don't pay for health care. We pay for their health care though. In Ukraine, they got free health care, just like they do in Israel. Guess who pay for it? Oh, the $4.7 billion we sent over there pay for it. The $6.8 billion we sent over to Israel pay for their health care. But we don't even think about that. We don't want our people to have health care. We would rather the insurance companies, the billionaires, make all the money. But because we have confirmation bias, the media and the billionaires through the media who own the media are able to manipulate our way of thinking. And they combine these other three, optimism, superiority, and religion, to make those manipulations possible. So as I say, you can reject this truth because it will require you to change the channel you're watching. Watch something different. I'm telling you, once you start watching something different, then your mind over time will change. But as long as you control a man's thinking, you don't have to worry about his actions. They don't have to worry about you raising up and say, no, we want this money. We want health care. While we paying for other people to have houses overseas when we can't afford houses over here. That don't even make sense. Does it? I mean, if you think about it logically, that does not make sense. But we do. And why? Because we are avoiding reality. We have created defense mechanisms to avoid the truth. So don't reject the truth, because it's going to require you to change.